It's my great privilege to be a part of DigitalOcean TIDE, the very first event that DigitalOcean is rolling out to start from India. So, cloud and startups. This is an inseparable relationship and an equation, and I've been tracking this trend for the last 8 years. So, before I get down to the details of cloud and startups, let me ask you a couple of questions. How many of you are startup CEOs or founders here? Quite a few. Excellent. How many of you are developers who write code on a day-to-day basis? Wow. The developers actually, they are more than the CEOs and the founders, which is fantastic. And how many of you use cloud on a day-to-day basis? Excellent. So we have a great mix, and I guess I'm going to preach to the choir because most of you are the users of cloud. But I want to give you a perspective on how cloud is fundamentally changing the culture and the way the startups are being incubated. So I have 3 things to talk to you about. The first thing is the changing face of startups across the globe. So the way the product is developed, it's fundamentally different from the traditional, the workflow, the process, the culture. So we're going to touch upon the changing face of the startups. Then I'm going to talk to you about why cloud, and to justify that, I take 10 data points to really tell you why cloud is important for startups. So let me get started. This deck is highly influenced and inspired by the Lean Startup. It's almost a Bible for most of the startups by Eric Ries. How many of you read that book, The Lean Startup? Okay, quite a few. If you haven't, I strongly recommend you to get that book and really read that, because it sets the stage, it sets the tone for your entrepreneurial journey. So I'm highly inspired by what Eric Ries said in the early days of my startup experience, and I'm actually taking some of his preachings and principles and trying to bring that to you today. So Eric Ries defines a startup as a company or a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. I think this is a very profound definition of a startup, right? Creating a repeatable and scalable business model is what we all strive for. And it is a temporary organization because no one is a startup forever. Startup journey is almost like crossing a bridge. You never permanently stay on a bridge. You are either the other side of the bridge or you have crossed the bridge, but you are never going to stay for a long time over the bridge. Similarly, startup is a journey where you are crossing a bridge, and that's the reason why it's a temporary organization. For example, Flipkart today, I'm not sure if it is still qualifies to be a startup because it has matured to an enterprise, right? So that's the reason why Eric calls that as a temporary organization. And the other definition is it's an institution designed to deliver a new product or services under extreme uncertainty. This is another very important factor. Startups work in a very different environment, a different culture, and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety. And if you don't relate to it yet, since you haven't started up, speak to the spouse of a startup co-founder and they'll tell you a lot of stories. They really know what this really means, right? So startups actually strive under these extreme circumstances and conditions, and that's the reason why they are represented as this incubating entity or something that is going through a struggle to become big and to become beautiful. So launching a startup is challenging. Again, this is not new. Most of us have gone through it, and you are experiencing that if you are in the early days of your journey. A while ago, just about 6-7 years ago, developing a product was very different. I worked for Microsoft for about 12 years, and during that journey, I have closely seen how Microsoft developed products. Typically, Windows had a cycle of 3 years. So Microsoft would ship a version of Windows, wait for 3 years, then ship the next version. And taking an example close to home, if you take Tally, an accounting software package that has become the de facto for most of the Indian organizations, was another product success story from India back in 90s and early 2000. there is something common between the scale of Microsoft and the impact that Tally created from Bangalore, from India. Both of them followed a mechanism, a process, a workflow where they knew the customer. Microsoft precisely knew who the customer is, Tally precisely knew who the customer is, and they assumed the features are known. They actually started by freezing the spec and then translated that into code, which eventually became a product. So they had a well-defined problem statement, they had a well-defined solution for that. And then they followed the waterfall methodology, which looks something like this. You start with the spec, then you build, you test and launch. And every product had its own life cycle and its own time window to go through this, right? So this was the traditional way of developing products. Today, the culture is very different. The dynamics are very different. The environment is very different. We cannot really follow what worked a decade ago anymore. And that's what actually reflects the culture within a startup. You got to be more agile. Now, you got to adopt cutting edge technologies and processes that's going to really make you ship much faster and align with your customer needs. The stark difference between developing a product in the 90s versus developing a product today is that you know the problem, but you may not necessarily know the solution. And that's a very tough spot to be in. You precisely know what the problem statement is, but the solution is always a moving target. You can never freeze the spec and then start developing your product. So we all start with unknown set of requirements. So you take an idea, then you build an MVP, and you get that into the hands of your early customers. You get their feedback, and you constantly iterate over the feature set. This is very easy to actually relate, when you see that on a slide. But if you are one of the CTOs of a startup, this is extremely challenging, and this is not meant for everyone. There are umpteen number of examples on how startups went through it. Some of them vanished because they couldn't take the pressure of going through the uncertainty and dealing with unknown set of requirements. Some of them came out in flying colors and completely pivoted from where they started to where they are today. I'm not going to take examples or brands or the actual startups that went through it. There are a lot of examples. There are many that we use on a day-to-day basis which have gone through this. So today's startups deal with unknown set of customers. You never know where your customer is going to come from. Take DigitalOcean for example. When they were still in Techstars, they had customers signing up from all over, even before they had their first data center outside of US, East Coast. And they had to deal with it. So you are going to encounter unknown set of customers who use your product in the most unexpected form. So you got to learn and adopt faster. So you got to make sure that you are learning from your early customers, adopting faster, and iterating quicker to stay relevant to them and also attract newer customers. And of course, the new mantra is try fast and fail fast. So if startups don't fail, they are not really startups. They always have a safety net, and a startup with a safety net is not going to really fly high. If you really want to experience the depth and breadth of entrepreneurial journey and developing a most relevant, most used product like Uber, you got to fail in the initial days, and you got to learn from that. So the ability to try fast and fail fast is what makes a startup much more thick-skinned, much more capable of going through a long journey and staying relevant for years to come. So today's startup needs to focus on simple implementation of idea. You don't have the luxury of developing something for years together and waiting for that to get released. Start with a minimum viable product, put that in the hands of your customers, learn from it, and keep iterating. Question the very initial assumptions that you wrote on your business plan or your pitch deck, always go back and ask how much is that is still relevant, and rinse and repeat. That's the iterative process. Again, credits goes to Eric Rice, who actually evangelized and very clearly articulated this process. This part of my presentation is just a condensed form of what he preaches through his book. But to start small and really grow big, you got to take risks. And to take that kind of a risk, you need the support system. And that support system today for our products is strongly coming from the infrastructure. When you start developing a product, particularly a SaaS product or a online presence or online business, you may actually get into one of the two blind spots. The first one is underestimating the demand. So you invest in a smaller set of infrastructure pool, and very soon that will be outrun by your customer demand. In which case, you are indirectly driving your customers to your competition because they don't want to see a failing server or a 404 or a 500 internal server error page welcoming them. So you are indirectly driving them to your competition. That's what happens when you under-invest in your infrastructure. Some early stage startups take this far too serious and they over-invest in the infrastructure, where your utilization factor is never aligned. You are over-invested and you always have surplus and excess, which is not good. So to really meet the actual demand, cloud is your friend. And cloud avoids the typical blind spot that the startups step into. So 10 reasons why cloud and startups are inseparable. I don't think, if not for cloud, we wouldn't have such a vibrant startup culture and an economy. It's impossible to think of a successful product that doesn't leverage a cloud platform. Earlier, you had to sign contracts. You had to spend 3/4 of your investment and your capital in infrastructure, and it was a huge lock-in. Today, you have an idea, you want to try it out, you want to share it with 10 of your friends, cloud is your friend. Spin up a server, get your code onto it, go live, share that link to a bunch of people who have confidence and trust in you, listen from them, and your journey starts from that. So let's take a closer look at some of the attributes that are fueling the growth of startups. Right? Self-service. This is phenomenal. In the pre-cloud era, provisioning a server was nothing less than a pain point for the startups. It was a huge challenge. You had to pick up the phone, talk to a colo or a data center provider, and he would send you reams of papers with agreements and legal jargons and buzzwords, and you never understood any of that. And today, you swipe your credit card, log into the portal, and in less than 2 minutes, you have a server with root access. You are basically in the driving seat. And this is the biggest attribute of cloud that changed the world forever, self-service. No capex. This is another very important factor. You never have to sign up for long-term contracts, no lock-in, and you are not going to spend a meaty amount of your investment on infrastructure. You never have to set aside capital for infrastructure. There is absolutely no capex required. Easy to scale. You start small, grow big. You start with one VM on any cloud platform, and then you can pretty much scale. You start in one geography, and then you become relevant in other geographies without you ever having a contract in place or signing a deal with the local data center provider. Sitting in Bangalore, you can become relevant to a customer in Portuguese, in Australia, in Middle East. So it's very easy to scale. and stay relevant. Automation, this is a big deal. And I'm sure most of you read the Industry 4.0 phenomenon that is coming up and how automation is going to impact most of the jobs. The thumb rule is pretty simple. If you are doing anything more than twice, look at a way to automate it, whether it is paying your bills or spinning up cloud servers. If you are doing it more than twice, that means it needs to be automated. Automation avoids human error. It is less error prone, more efficient, and delivers consistency each time and every time you repeat the task. And cloud is the best example of automation. You create a template and you spin it up umpteen number of times with exactly the same precision and same consistency and same performance. Of course, it's elastic. You are able to scale out and scale in on demand, all in minutes. There are a lot of examples of where elasticity is being used. The classic thing that I used to articulate during my early days of cloud evangelism was IRCTC. IRCTC during Tatkal booking is an example of before elasticity. After elasticity is Uber with surge pricing, right? The fleet of cars is there, but the user demand is so high, and the algorithm that is connecting or doing the matchmaking between the passenger and the driver needs to scale. So Uber has an amazing automated elastic infrastructure, and they can practically shrink and expand based on the current needs and demand and the timing. So that's an example of elasticity. Pay by use. You basically start with few cents an hour or for as low as $5 a month. And if you spin up another server in the middle of the month, you actually pay only for that specific duration. And if you turn off or terminate the instance, you will never encounter the charge. So this is again changing the equation, because pay by use will empower startups who are working on a shoestring budget to really go as far as they can without taking a toll on their ability to innovate. And continuous integration. This goes back to our iterative process. Thanks to many emerging technologies, DevOps, continuous integration and deployment, constant continuous monitoring, continuous testing, and continuous user feedback. Prabhakar was mentioning about the user voice. That basically drives continuous innovation for DigitalOcean and many other innovative companies. And the best thing is, the same set of tools are available to you. By connecting GitHub to Jenkins and your cloud provider, you instantly enable a mechanism of pushing your code to the production servers with enough checks. So anyone can take the benefit of culture, processes, and tools that were only limited to Facebook's, Google's, and Twitter's of the world. Today, the advantage is you have exposure to some of the secret sauce of these companies, and guess what? You have access to exactly the same set of tools that they use internally. Whether it is Kubernetes that came out of Google's data center, or it is the machine learning that Amazon has put it up as a service, or the Hadoop stack, which was available within Google data center and Google's internal research, all of them are available for you to leverage and innovate and integrate continuously. The same set of tools that are available to Fortune 500 companies and the top 5 leaders in technology, exactly the same set of tools. Free resources. I have never seen an era where the vendors are competing to give away. Right? DigitalOcean announced Hatch with select partners, and they are giving away credits. It's not just DigitalOcean. Today, you think of any cloud provider, any platform company, they only have great things to give away. This is the best time to be an entrepreneur. This is the best time to build a product. This is the best time to be a startup, because you are in the limelight and you are attracting so much of attention that vendors are competing to empower you, support you, and make you successful. And we can take tremendous advantage of that. And of course, that opens up choice of operating systems. You want Ubuntu, Debian, SUSE, Microsoft Windows, an OS of your choice. You want to experiment and write a new algorithm in Google's Go language, or Node.js, or Python with Flask, or Ruby with Rails. You have the choice that you need. The frameworks, the libraries, the runtimes, the operating systems, the geographies. So there is tremendous choice. Sometimes choice is not very, very helpful, but if you are cautious and if you are able to focus, you can actually derive the best out of the choice that's available to you. And ultimately, exploit the power of cloud to stay focused on your offering. There is a lot of heavy lifting that the cloud vendors are doing without you realizing. You get a scalable, secure, reliable, available infrastructure for a few cents or a few rupees per month. And that takes off a huge burden from innovators, developers, and startups, so that you can stay focused on your product without worrying about spinning up a new VM or scaling them, monitoring them, patching them, and so on. Towards the second half of the day, I have a demo where I basically take an MVP to the cloud and scale it out. So stay tuned for that as I wrap up this keynote. So again, it's a great opportunity and my privilege to be a part of the DigitalOcean TIDE event. I'm here to stay. I have a couple of more sessions, and during the afternoon I'm going to wear the developer hat and talk to you about hardcore tech. So do stay tuned. I'm actually more excited to be a developer on stage than as a keynote speaker. So I'm looking forward to come back and show you some cool stuff. So thanks again. Have a great conference. See you again.